website. So I'll be giving a bit more information about that at the end. All right, so I'll start up and introduce this event. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this special workshop with Victoria and West Shore Child and Youth Mental Health. My name is Beatrice Toner. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for Saanich Neighbourhood Place. We're a nonprofit organization that's been serving families and children in Saanich and Greater Victoria for over 25 years. Some of you may already know us from our drop-in programs, community kitchens, or other parenting programs. So those who are returning to us, welcome. Welcome back, and those who are new to us, welcome. Before we get going, please feel free to use the Q&A function that will allow us to see your questions and address them when the panelists see fit. We'll probably be doing those questions mostly at the end, but feel free to jot them down in the Q&A feature for us to have there and be able to answer. I do want to thank the United Way of Greater Victoria and Children's Health Foundation. They provide the funding to make these kinds of events possible. And before we go ahead and begin, I'm just going to put a little poll out to everyone who's here. This is just to get a sense of who's in the room. So about how many children you have and the ages of your children. So you should see it up there on your screen now. And just click on the answers that you've got, and we'll have them available just so we get a sense of who's here. So we're very lucky to be joined today by 3 clinicians from Child and Youth Mental Health Services. We've got Dr. Marei Perrin, Dr. Jackie Bush, and Heather Vale, and they'll be facilitating today's session. So let's see who's in the room. Looks like most folks have children sort of ages 1, 2, and 3, with a big concentration. Oh, sorry, that's not ages, that's number of children. Most people have 2 children, and the ages do range a lot, with a focus on sort of ages 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. So thank you for, I'm just gonna put, there you can see the poll there, see who's in the room. Okay, I'll let you folks take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here for the second part of our 3-part workshop. Today, we're talking about fostering emotional and social well-being in children. Next slide, please, B. The concept of emotional and social well-being is essentially refers to a child's ability to form close and stable relationships with adults and peers, the ability to experience, manage, and express a wide range of emotions, and the ability to explore the environment and learn. So that's a bit of a sense of what we mean by social and emotional development. And our goals for today are to talk a little bit about the principles of early brain development, give a bit of an overview of that, and to talk about some of the key factors that are important in fostering emotional development in kids. And one of the running themes of this presentation, and actually all of the presentations we're doing, is the importance of the caregiver-child relationship in promoting child development.
Great. So I'll start us off a little bit talking about the principles of early development and the ones that we'll be covering today. We're going to be showing just a short clip on how brains are built, and what will be really highlighted is that brains are shaped ongoingly by experience. Brains keep changing, and especially for young kids, they're so very much malleable and very dependent on the experiences that they're receiving. Heather will talk a little bit about resilience, and what we mean by that is just refers to a good outcome even though there was maybe an adverse event that happened. The importance of serve and return in early development, will highlight that as well too, and then also the impact of stress on early development. And B, we can go to the next slide. So we're going to just show this little clip about how brains are built for our young kids.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the developing brain, building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious, ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
Nothing else? Okay. So one of the things we're talking about today is what is resilience. And resilience is important because it's a combination of factors that enable people to positively adapt in the face of adversity. So when we're going through something like a pandemic, we want to support kids and adults to respond in a more resilient manner. It's a sense of mastery and the ability to manage difficulty in an adaptive way. And I think one of the keys that's important is that it's not something we're born with. It's something that we develop over time through interactions between ourselves and other people and our environment. So with children, that would be children and their caregivers and their environment. Can we go to the next? And so one of the things we wanted to highlight is that research has identified a common set of factors that help us develop resiliency and lead to positive outcomes. And you'll notice there is as Jackie pointed out, there are some themes here. One of them is to facilitate supportive adult-child relationships. So we keep coming back to caregiver-child relationships because it's so important to kids in so many ways. It supports developing resiliency.
building a sense of self-efficacy and a perceived control throughout the day. So that goes back to the routines we talked about during the last presentation and how important that is. Routines provide stability. And then providing opportunities to strengthen adaptive skills and self-regulatory capacities. We talked a little about that last time when we talked about empathy and co-regulation. And today we're going to talk about it as well in calming environments. But just that idea of supporting children and helping children learn who they are and also learn how to manage big emotions. And they learn a lot from us. And then mobilizing sources of faith, hope, cultural traditions, and community supports. And a lot of that goes back to a sense of identity. So we really want to help kids figure out who they are and how they can manage challenges, because we all have them. And we want kids to come out of challenges and, for example, the pandemic, in a better place than where they started, maybe. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So we know that healthy relationships between children and caregivers are important for fostering child development. And one of the processes that can support that, which was mentioned in the video, is serve and return. So we're just going to watch a video about that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it after.
Did you know that you can help build a child's brain?
Those are bananas.
Everyday interactions can have a big impact on developing brains throughout childhood, starting even before babies can talk.
Scientists call this serve and return, like a game of tennis or ping pong. A child serves by showing an interest in something, and the adult responds in a supportive way.
Finding moments throughout the day to do it is easy and fun, and you'll be building strong brains. You can use 5 steps to practice serve and return with any child. Step 1, share the focus.
When a child is interested or curious, you can see it.
What's this? It's a stroller.
Watch this child look at something in a book. Right there. Pointing shows interest.
Cow.
So does making a sound, like this child. And mom is paying close attention.
See baby moving those little arms and legs and focusing on the ball? That's a serve.
The key is paying attention to what the child is noticing.
Oh, you like those guys too?
Look at Grandpa sharing the focus.
By noticing serves, you will help build curiosity, and you'll strengthen your relationship.
Step 2, support and encourage.
You can return a child's serve by saying a word of encouragement.
That's right. Pretty good.
Watch Grandpa return this serve by saying thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Even a facial expression can encourage a child.
Orange.
Or emotion, like this mom dancing.
Time. A.
You can also pick up the object that the child is pointing to and bring it closer.
We need help to sit her down.
Things like helping and playing with the child let them know that their thoughts and feelings are heard and understood. Step 3, name it.
Yeah, the puppy. See the windows, the house.
When you return a child's serve by naming what they are seeing, doing, or feeling, you make important language connections in their brain.
He's got bumps all over him, huh?
This brain building happens even before a child can talk or understand your words.
You can name anything: a person, a thing, an action, a feeling, or a combination.
Clean up, everybody do your shit.
When you name what a child is focused on, you help build understanding of the world around us and what to expect from it.
The baby's sitting. Ooh, the baby's sitting in the back seat of the car.
You like those? Those are raisins. You have raisins all the time.
Naming also gives a child words to use later and shows that words are important to you.
Step 4, take turns back and forth.
Taking turns helps children learn self-control and how to get along with others.
Waiting is crucial. When you return a serve, give the child a chance to respond.
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
Note that the caregiver waits here for the next serve.
See this toddler navigating a new adventure? Grandpa is waiting patiently, returning serves by asking questions and then waiting to see what happens next.
You want to cover it?
Yeah.
Are you cold?
Yeah.
Oh, we put this over your lap like this, okay? Yeah. Do you like that?
Yeah.
Oh.
By waiting, you give the child time to develop ideas and build confidence and independence.
Step 5. Practice endings and beginnings.
You want to go over there?
Children signal when they're done or ready to move on to a new activity.
Watch how this child shows it's time to start something new. Letting go of a toy signals an ending. Then picking up a new toy signals the next beginning.
Want to play with the giraffe?
Sharing the focus is important in this step.
Ooh, the big eagle.
Because this mom is sharing the focus, she notices when her child is ready to end one activity and begin something new.
X, Y, and Z.
When you can find these moments for a child to take the lead,
Want to try this one?
you support the child in exploring their world
Would you like to play with something else?
and make more serve and return interactions possible.
Sit there.
Serve and return interaction is critical for a child's developing brain. And the best news is that you can do it anytime, anywhere, without any need for toys or technology.
Look for small opportunities throughout the day, like while you're making a snack or while you're grocery shopping. What matters most is that you're doing each of these 5 steps. Notice the serve and share the child's focus of attention. Return the serve by supporting and encouraging. Name it, take turns going back and forth, and practice endings and beginnings.
Serve and return interactions make everyday moments fun and become second nature with practice. Try practicing with a child today.
Thanks, Bea. So just a quick recap from the video. The 5 steps are to share the focus. That can be the part where you're paying attention or noticing what the child's looking at, or if they're moving around or pointing at something. And that would be a serve. And it's important to recognize you can't spend all day doing this because you have a lot to do. A caregiver has a lot to do in a day. So it's just about sprinkling them in throughout the day. And sometimes it can be at convenient times, like maybe when you're helping your child dressed or standing in line at the grocery store, like they were saying. Sometimes there are more opportunities to engage in these interactions. So the first step is sharing the focus, is noticing what the child is focusing on. Then the second step is supporting, encouraging. So this is kind of when you return the serve, like in tennis. And that could be something like smiling or saying, oh, I see, those kinds of things. Maybe picking up an object that the child's pointing at and giving it to the child. So supporting and encouraging the interaction. And the third step is naming it. And by naming what's going on, you help make important language connections in the child's brain, even if they don't have language yet or that hasn't developed. And you can name pretty much anything, a person, a thing, a feeling. The child points to her feet and you say, yes, those are your feet. And that helps the child understand her world and help develop words as well. So it can do quite a bit. The fourth step is waiting for the child to respond. And that's when you're doing the turn taking back and forth. And sometimes you have to wait for a child to respond. Sometimes it can happen really quickly and some nice back and forth. But for some kids, especially younger kids who are trying to learn a lot and take in a lot in their world, sometimes there's a bit of a pause before they might respond. And the more you can wait for that pause, that shows that you care about what they're doing, and it gives them a chance to be independent and develop their ideas and thoughts about what they're doing. And then the practicing the endings and the beginnings. So as the video showed, often kids will give kind of a clear signal that they're ready to end an interaction and maybe start a new one. And by letting them take that lead, it helps them develop independence and a sense of themselves, which can be really important in terms of their own child development. And we've talked quite about younger kids, but you can do this with older kids too. You know, sometimes it might look a little bit different. It could be your child coming up to you, your 8-year-old child coming up to you and showing you a new move he learned in his video game. Sometimes it could just be a child coming into the kitchen where you're cooking dinner and sitting at the counter, maybe saying something, maybe not, but that could be considered a serve where they're looking for an interaction and that kind of thing. Okay.
Great. We oftentimes get questions about stress and development, so we thought we'd just spend a couple of minutes talking about stress. And there's really lots of different types of stress, and they have different impacts on development. So feel free to show that video.
Research has proven that positive experiences in our earliest years actually help build brain architecture. So does that mean negative experiences can weaken brain architecture? The answer is yes, and the culprit is certain kinds of stress. The body and brain respond to stress by raising the heartbeat, pumping out adrenaline, and sending out stress hormones like cortisol, preparing us to act in a crisis. One kind of stress, called positive stress, is beneficial. It's normal and healthy for children to face challenges like meeting new people or attending the first day of school. The stress responses triggered by these events are usually short and not too severe. This kind of stress is positive because it prepares the brain and body for stressful situations later in life.
There are kind of these multiple phases of stress. So we have kind of what we call good stress, which is this kind of controllable stress in our lives, things like studying for a test, solving a problem. At the time we may not like them, but the reality of it is that we grow from them, we develop adaptive coping skills, and they kind of benefit us in the long run.
Children surrounded by caring adults experience positive stress in ways that benefit and strengthen their brain architecture. It's how we prepare our brains and bodies for other stressful events that we will experience throughout life. Sometimes children face more serious events. Think of a bad accident or a tragedy like a death in the family or a natural disaster. These events can cause a more severe stress response with the potential to last a long time and come back often. Support from caregivers can buffer the severity of the stress response and help keep stress levels under control. If the stress is kept in check, it won't do lasting damage to the child's brain and body. That's called tolerable stress.
And so this is things that are bad, but they're the kind of things we can't avoid, like the death of our parents or moving away from home, things that everyone goes through, and they're not positive. They're kind of negative in value, but they're the kind of things that everyone goes through. We can all kind of support each other, and they're made a lot easier by support networks and, you know, coping skills and stuff like that.
The attention and support of caregivers prevents tolerable stress from causing lasting harm to developing brains. A third kind of stress is called toxic stress. It occurs during repeated exposure to bad situations like abuse, neglect, or serious hardship. If no supportive adults are around to help buffer the stress response, the hormone levels stay dangerously high. Severe stress is especially toxic if it occurs often and lingers for a long time. That can have a negative impact on brain architecture and on other systems in the body. Toxic stress can cause serious health problems later in life.
These are things that are like pervasive, typically very uncontrollable and unpredictable, abusive relationships, poverty, loss of job, loss of social status, things like this, which are kind of beyond our control and are very pervasive in our life and really kind of have this detrimental effect on us.
Toxic stress can weaken developing brain architecture and damage other body systems in young children. The effects can be a lifetime of health challenges, including physical and mental health problems and even addiction. To ensure a healthier future for our families and communities, We need to work together to support caregivers and children, prevent toxic stress, and provide the kinds of nurturing experiences that build healthy brains and bodies.
Okay, thanks, Bea, so much. So this video is just to, really illustrate that there's lots of different types of stress, and they all have a different impact on development. And the most common stress is really actually the positive stress. So these are situations that, we really might not love in the moment. Like for kids, that first day of school can be really anxiety provoking, or having to meet new people or make new friends. Going back to school after COVID-19 with a different rules that the kids had to follow, all made them, maybe some kids a little temporarily feeling weird. I don't really like this, but that would really fall under the category of positive stress in the sense of giving ourselves a chance to cope and to move forward and learn from that. So that's the growth learning type of stress that we will all encounter, and we actually should not avoid with that. And then we have that sudden high stress level, and that is oftentimes just really unexpected. So the examples around, car accident or a death of a parent, these things will happen from time to time in our lives, but they can very much be buffered through that supportive, caring relationship. And we know, just research tells us, if a child has that one supportive, positive relationship in their life with an adult, it doesn't have to be a parent necessarily, it can make a really big difference in helping mediate some of these difficulties. And then the final one is that chronic stress. And that one we know we're more worried about in the sense that it's ongoing. There's not a lot of reprieve from it. And it can be just very, there's not a lot of protection in the sense of another safe person there to help guide the child through it. So that, fortunately, that stress is the least common that kids will encounter, but that we also know have the most potential for disrupting normal learning and development as well. Thanks, Bea.
All right. So now we have an idea about why we want to build children's brains in a healthy kind of positive direction. And there are 3 areas that we think are really important, and the research shows us are really important to doing this. And the first is the responsive and nurturing caregivers. So that's you guys and other people in your kids' lives. And we'll talk more specifically about some of the things that are important about that relationship. And then the next thing is calming environments. And I think, we're learning more and more that that's an important thing for caregivers as well as children. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then our favorite topic is learning through play. And we're going to talk about that at the end of our presentation today. And excitingly, we're going to talk about it for a whole presentation in 2 weeks from now.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about responsive and nurturing caregiving. So responsive caregiving is essentially, it's sort of watching and tuning in your child's cues, thinking about what those cues might mean or might signaling, and then responding to them in a sense of nurturing way. So the first part is attending to what your child might be signaling. And this can be sometimes pretty easy to understand, to see and make sense of. So a child who's yawning and maybe rubbing her eyes can be a pretty clear signal that she's feeling tired and needs to rest. But sometimes it can be a bit trickier to get a sense of what is that underlying need. We talked a little bit last time in the previous session about how all behavior has meaning. And that sometimes we can be focused on what the actual behavior is that we don't necessarily take a step back and think, what's behind this behavior, or why is this behavior happening? So thinking about what's the need behind the behavior be important. So for example, if a child is having a is crying and sort of upset because he can't wear the same shirt that he's been wearing for the past 4 days. Sort of trying to make sense of that. Like, why is this happening? What's going on for him? Is he feeling anxious and wants some control or a sense of security? What is that need that he's having in that moment? Another piece is responding consistently and dependably. Most of the time is key. Not all of the time, that's just not possible ever. But on a fairly consistent basis, being able to be responsive to your kids can be important because it helps them develop trust that you're a person or a caregiver will respond to them with kindness, sensitivity. And the more they have that trust, that helps them in terms of decreasing anxiety and stress. It can promote development, help them with problem-solving skills, and a whole host of other things. So that fairly consistent, dependable responsiveness is important. Also accepting the child's unique needs, perspectives, and abilities. So all kids are different, and sometimes we can lose track of why is this child responding in this way? I don't really understand it. Sometimes it can seem like an overreaction. So trying to put yourself in your child's perspective and think a little bit about what might be going on for that child would be pretty important. Next slide, please, B. And considering the child's age and temperament can also be helpful in being responsive to your children. So, you know, even within one family, for example, you could have one child who wakes up in the morning with tons of energy and lots of questions and wants to talk and is looking for stimulation. And then you can have another child who maybe is a little slower to get up in the morning, maybe likes it to be really quiet and can't handle that kind of overstimulation, or needs a lot of quiet time to sort of ease into their day. And so being attentive and understanding your kids and what their particular temperaments are can be helpful in knowing how to respond to your different children's needs in that way. Delighting in your children is really important. So enjoying them and having fun with them and can be important because it helps children feel like it can help develop their sense of self, their sense of self-esteem, to think that, oh, my parents or my caregivers enjoy my presence. They smile when I come into the room, or they laugh when I something funny, or they take an interest and enjoy what I'm doing. It can be really important. And finally, attuning to their feelings can be important as well. And sometimes that can be also a bit tricky. Again, going back to that behavior and underlying needs. So you might have a child who comes home from school and slams his backpack on the floor, opens the fridge, slams it, and says, "There's nothing good to eat here," and then goes off into the living room and sits on the couch. And sometimes our instinct is to say, you're supposed to put your backpack in your bedroom, or we don't slam things in this house, sort of focus on behavior and the rules. Whereas if you're attuning to the feelings, you might go into the living room, maybe just sit down next to the child, maybe put your arm around him, or maybe say, you know, hard day, showing that you're responding to the underlying feeling that you've picked up on.
Thanks, Jackie. So we thought about showing you, or we will be showing you this video. It's a quite powerful video just to show how important our reactions are for our kids, and to like how much your reactions matter to your child, and in this case from very early on, from early infancy, and how you respond has a lot to do then with how they will respond as well too, and that back and forth. So we'll just take a sneak peek at this one.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Thanks so much, Bea. So that video just highlights, or I think really well, just how important we are for our kids and helping them regulate their emotions and behaviors. And again, just also want to emphasize, what Jackie was saying. There's no expectation to do this 24/7. That's not possible. And yet kind of sprinkled through the day, even with older kids. I know we're showing younger kid videos here, but for older kid videos, when just to check in with them, or if they really want to get your attention, give them almost that. We talk about that 30-second burst of attention, or return to them and just listen to them, validate their feelings, and then we can go back to what we're doing. And it kind of goes back to that serve and return as well too, and makes kids oftentimes feel less or more settled. And within that also, verbal interaction, as we alluded to before, is really important in kids' development. So even when they're really young and, probably you're not really understanding yet what you're saying, and certainly can't talk themselves yet, we know, just again, research showing us that talking with the kids often helps a lot with their overall development, and particularly their language development as well, by talking to them and learning from you about what this world is all about, and how you describe and talk about things will help them to get that as well for themselves as too. So even as soon as the kids are born, just lots of chatter with them and engagement is so important. Even if we feel like from early on they might not be giving us as much as that baby in the video, it will come over time. And the more we do it, the faster it comes online too. Thank you, Bea.
All right. So some of this will be repetitive for those of you that saw our last presentation, but we think it's really important, because when a child feels safe, or when we feel safe, we're free to explore and learn. And if we feel uncertain or confused, we're unable to explore and learn. And so when it comes to our children, we want to make sure that we provide a predictable, consistent environment that gives them some sense of stability. And a soothing, responsive caregiver is part of that calming environment. So what we're going to talk about a little today are the daily routines, which we've touched on, and predictable daily caregiver tasks as well, consistent limits and boundaries, and age-appropriate expectations and choices. B, can we switch to the next? Oops, I've lost mine now. So the first thing that we want to touch on again is creating morning and bedtime routines, and probably most of you have these in place. During the pandemic, it's been a little bit challenging for some people to maintain those, and we've had to be a little bit more flexible about them. But I think kind of going back, revisiting them, looking at them, and if things are a little bit off, kind of starting with maybe the morning one and figuring out how do you do that again, especially if your kids have just gone back to school. It's different now because your kids may only be going to school 1 or 2 days a week. So looking at how can you kind of revisit that morning routine. And then the bedtime routine is especially important because it's how they get ready for sleep. And so we want to do everything we can to kind of slow things down, make things calm, help them relax in their body, and have a really good night's sleep, which allows them to come back the next day in a better place. We know that eating at least one meal a day together as a family is important when they're toddlers, but equally, believe it or not, as important when they're teenagers. It's one of those things that helps kids be protected and resilient. And that could be, it doesn't have to be, you know, homemade sit-down Christmas meal. We're talking pick up Kentucky Fried Chicken, sit down together at the table and have it. That is perfectly fine. So whatever works for your family is what's important, but it's the sitting down together and eating it. Chunking the days, we talked a little bit about that last time, maybe doing something like exercise in the morning, and in the afternoon we do more restful, individual kinds of things. And you know, at nighttime, some of the chunking is about around bedtime routines, reading, things like that. So just thinking about how best does your day work in terms of chunking activities so that it's more predictable and consistent. And then facilitating daily exercise. And we know that about, 60 minutes a day or so of daily exercise is great. But do what we can. And we might combine those things. We might go for a walk in nature, and it gives us both that kind of calming, relaxing experience, but also that physical activity, and the kids can kind of run ahead and come back and run ahead and come back if that's what they want to do. They're exploring, they're interested, and it gives us a chance to be out in nature as well. I think that's it for that slide. And then thinking about, when you think about your routines, thinking about calming routines as well. So starting with something familiar, do something that you already notice works in your family for you and your children. And I think all of us have those, and it could be something as simple as, maybe it's, as I was saying, when we're walking in nature. It could be at bedtime. There are certain times when things are very calming and regular. Introducing new strategies at less stressful times. And we know that we learn better when, as I was saying before, we're feeling calm and safe. So starting something new, making the activities fun and engaging. So sometimes it's about visualizations and using your voices and things like that, just like you would with any story, and practicing them together. So this might be family yoga. It might be even when you do your breath work and you play with that a little bit. It might be teaching your children how to belly breathe with a stuffy on their belly, but a stuffy on your belly too. And really engaging in it as a family activity and thinking about how do you bring more of this into your daily routines.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about limit setting and choice giving, and we're going to be talking about an approach that we like. It's known as the ACT model. So we'll watch a quick video about it, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it after. So the model is essentially a 3-step process. So the first step is to acknowledge the feeling or the desire that the child is showing. So for example, it would be really fun to draw color on the wall. And by acknowledging that feeling or the desire, you're helping the child learn about their feelings, and you're also communicating that you get it. You know what they're feeling, what they're wanting in that moment. The second step is to communicate the limit. So, and the wording is pretty specific. So it's walls are not for coloring on. And using that language, walls are for coloring on, helps take away any feeling of shame or defensiveness that the child might feel, you know, versus not supposed to color on the walls, or you shouldn't color on the walls. By saying the walls are not for coloring on, you kind of remove that piece of it, that potential shame piece that could come along with it. And the third step is to target an alternative. So give another option for the child. So you may color on the newspaper or in the coloring book. So giving them a choice of where they can color. So it would be so much fun to color on the wall, but walls are not for coloring on. You can color in the coloring book or on the newspaper. And limit setting in this way helps children develop a sense of responsibility because they're making the choices for their behavior, which can help foster independence and an understanding of their own role and their responsibility. And you may have to go through this several times when you're trying to set a limit.
Yeah, thanks so much. We do want to spend a couple minutes talking about play, because play is so important, really, from the cradle to the grave, really. So we just want to show this video and then talk a little bit about the power of play, and then knowing that we will go into a lot more detail about how to do this kind of play with your child in our next session in 2 weeks.
Watch this scientist at work. What? You don't see a scientist? You just see a baby playing? Well, look again. This baby is as much a scientist as Albert Einstein. Play is how children test their ideas and learn new skills. Play is children's work. From day one, children are eager and determined to understand how the world works. Play is how children learn to communicate, problem solve, and get along with others. Watch your child at play, and you will see the kind of concentration, passion, and creativity that artists and scientists bring to their work. Think of the 8-week-old who learns about communication and the joy of close relationships as he smiles, coos, and gurgles when his mom talks with him. Picture a toddler using his body and mind to learn about concepts like in and out, and how much he is loved, all while wiggling through a tunnel. And then there's the 3-year-old playing pretend, developing her ideas, learning new words, using her imagination, and building friendships as she makes up stories with her peers. So encouraging your child's play is one of the most important ways you can nurture her development, and it begins on day one. When you show your baby interesting objects to explore with her eyes, you ignite her curiosity in the world around her. As your baby begins to reach out and grasp, he learns how things work through shaking, banging, and mouthing. She learns to push a button to make the toy move, or to stack one block on top of another. Play also builds your child's confidence and self-esteem as he learns to solve problems and make things happen. And in this second year, one major strategy children use in their play is imitation. Toddlers use their new physical skills and growing memory to copy how others do things. By the time children are 18 months, all that imitation leads to an amazing new skill: playing pretend. Soon, children can pretend a laundry basket is a car, or that a blanket thrown over a table is a cave. So why is this important? The basket, the blanket, they are both symbols, stand-ins for the real thing. And understanding symbols is important because, for one, the ability to read is all about using words, which are symbols. Words represent people, things, and ideas. And in math, numbers are symbols for quantities. Pretend play also builds social emotional skills. As young children make up stories and try out different roles, they learn how other people feel, think, and experience the world. This new perspective helps children become both good friends and good people. But the most important ingredient for learning through play is you. You matter. Research shows that playtime with parents helps children learn. How, you ask? In lots of ways. You build your child's problem-solving skills and confidence by giving him a chance to work out a challenge that comes up during play on his own. If needed, provide just enough support so that your child can accomplish the goal without doing it all for her. This lets her experience the mastery. You help your child build physical skills by presenting new challenges when you see your child is ready. And you help your child develop her ideas and imagination by joining in her pretend play and encouraging her to develop a story. Studies also show that when parents play with their babies, babies play longer and develop better play skills than when they play alone. And children whose parents play with them regularly as toddlers are more likely to have better math and reading skills in 5th grade. Most importantly, when learning takes place in the context of loving relationships, children become eager, lifelong learners. So the next time you sit down to play with your child, remember that with your help, as your child is learning to play, he's also playing to learn.
Thank you. So play is hugely important for all aspects of development for children. And here are just a few of them that the video also highlighted. So in terms of building confidence and self-esteem, you know, play gives the perfect opportunities for kids to figure things out and then get that cool, proud moment afterwards, aha, I did it. Having lots of opportunity to practice even emotional regulation skills. You know, oftentimes things don't go the way that we, you know, hope it will go in our play. Maybe that picture didn't turn out like the child wanted, or the blocks, you know, fell down. And within those safe areas of play, kids, you know, can experiment like with frustration tolerance and how to be able to move on. And that's oftentimes easier done within the play context than outside of the play context. Promoting social understanding, empathy through pretend play, imagination play, will come through that. Lots of research showing that opportunities for play improves behavior regulation and even academic performance later on as well too. We know it strengthens language development, and our really good players oftentimes have increased enthusiasm for future learning. You know, they're not shy about even making mistakes, and they're just going to go for it and have more zest for exploration sometimes, because during play that was safe to do and they were able to experiment and oftentimes had success with doing that. And then just experimenting, you know, when it doesn't work, try again, try different ways, skill building. So really the benefits of play are so vast, and that's why we'll focus on it next time as well, more too. The next slide. And there's also some real magic actually that happens when you're there as a playmate for your child. We know that your presence there can even more support their learning and development in many different areas, and even promote higher level cognitive skills like problem solving, how to figure things out. And oftentimes that happens through what that video was talking about, scaffolding. You just give enough help. You know, you can see your kid is struggling, you don't do it for them. During play, you can just give them enough help that they can do it themselves. And that can be really helpful. And then finally, we know that one-on-one play does amazing things to strengthen that parent-child relationship. And that solid base is so important for anything else afterwards too. So that parent-child play can just be really, really powerful for the child and child development. And here are just a couple tips. Again, we'll go into a lot more detail next time about this. Is when you play, let the child lead. Oftentimes as adults, we have lots of good ideas too about how we might want to play or how we might want to get our kid to play, even remind ourselves of how we used to play. But this is the time where we actually just want to see what the child does and be curious about what the child does. So more kind of sit back, you're still there, but let them go first, and then join in when invited. Oftentimes they'll give you a role, mom, dad, do this, then you want to be there. And in general, thinking about trying to be with these, what we call be with attitudes, that the kid really gets the feeling that I'm here for you, I'm not distracted, you're all that matters right now, what you're doing, and I see you, I get what you're doing, it's cool what you're doing, I love what you're doing, and I really care. So again, we'll explore that more next time as well too, how to do that with some more specific skills that we'll teach you guys. But just a little snapshot.
So that leads us into the next presentation we're doing is June 30th at 2:30, and that'll be the powers of play, empowering parents to help their children cope during the pandemic and beyond. And it'll be all about that stuff that Marei just touched on. And just some gentle reminders from today and last time: take it as it comes, do your best, reach out for help, offer help to others, and remember you can always stop, take a breath, apologize, and start over. We're all in this together, we're learning, we're growing, and who knows where we're headed, but kind of an exciting journey. Thank you from all three of us for attending this, and we look forward to any questions you might have, any suggestions you have. We're open to them, and we'd really like to hear from you guys. Bea, over to you.
Thank you all three of you for imparting such wisdom, and for participants for sticking with us. So yeah, the floor is now open for questions. We've had one already come through, so I'll read it out to the panelists so you can respond. And if any other questions come up, please jot them into the Q&A box, and we'll try our best to answer. About the next session, you should be able to find the same, wherever you found how to register for this, and is the same place to register for the next one. And I'll be emailing out everybody who attended today with the link to register in case you haven't already. So the question we've had, I'll just close here we go. So the question we have is about the earlier part of the presentation around stress. So how can you repair damage from toxic stress for a 6-year-old with a history of sexual abuse, exposure to domestic violence, neglect, and attachment disruptions?
Do you want to take that?
Sure.
Yeah, I think what you're just describing there, that will be a role where a trained mental health professional would help guide that family and the child specifically to go towards, recovery of that. And yeah, there's lots that we can do with that, but I would say that that's a case where you would want a professional to help you out as well.
And the information for contacting Child and Youth Mental Health Services was at the beginning of the slides, and I'll include it when I send out the email to all the attendees so that folks can reach out to you with more guidance around that.
Yeah.
One thing I will say though is that if we go back to those things that we were talking about with caregivers and really work with those things with that child, that's a real solid beginning. And thinking about the things like predictability, consistency, those things are so important in a situation. They're important for all of us, but especially in a situation like that. So there are things that you can do and you can start to do now. That's okay.
All right, so the next question is, what would you suggest when giving choices and your child says they don't like any of the choices?
I think one of the things we've learned is that you have to make the choices that you're giving have to be palatable to both of you. And so sometimes we have to reconsider the choices we're offering and offer something that might be a little bit more palatable. But I think you two may have something else to add to that as well.
That's a really good point. The choices have to be almost kind of real choices, like, and maybe you are giving real choices for sure. If the choice is, you either eat your spinach or you eat the broccoli or something like that, or you either go to your room now or you never have, or can't watch TV. Like those are sometimes, like, I don't want to choose from two bad choices, the options for the kids. So, but it's hard to come up with choices that that work. And so sometimes we recommend, if there's a common thing that you're running into, let's say around the food issue or around stopping electronics and whatnot, to brainstorm ahead of time. Like it's hard to do it on the spot for us to, but with a little bit thinking about it, sometimes we can be more prepared. So, but if there's a common kind of power struggle you're getting into, then giving some time ahead of time to think about, okay, what are really the choices and how can we make them maybe more likely to succeed.
Thank you. So another question around the toxic stress. How would you repair toxic stress for a 9-year-old when the mental abuse is from the principal and or teacher at their elementary school?
9-year-old. So I'm wondering if that's still going on or if that's in the past. I think that would make a difference with the two. Heather, Jack, you want to chime in?
I think it's just going back, and Marei, you mentioned it when we were talking about toxic stress. I mean, one of the things we'd want to make sure is that it's still not happening now, currently. And just remembering that, having a really supportive caregiver in their lives, so when they come home to you or somebody else that they have a real connection with, is enough to support them through that, and helping them understand that that situation isn't the entirety of their life. Again, it depends on whether or not it's still happening now, but I think any of these situations, the sooner we can have a child out of a situation like that, if we can't change the situation, the better. But it's hard to know without knowing all of the exact circumstances of the situation. But I think it's just going back and remembering that the children need a good, solid relationship with at least one caregiver in their life, and that will help them through that and helps define their sense of self. Anything else from you two?
No, I think that one caregiver is so important, because we're going to experience stress in our lives, and we're going to experience, our kids are going to experience things that we really don't want them to experience. Like that's part of life, and be that, a bully or another adult saying really mean things. And so sometimes these things will happen and we don't have control over those. Once we learn about them, sometimes we do have some control about stopping them. But in the meantime, we want to be able to buffer our kids from that stress. And I think, a lot of the presentation that we talked about today and the one coming up does exactly that, those bullets, not real bullet, but that those can roll off them a little easier when we have that supportive environment and really supportive relationship. That is really key. The two, but knowing we're gonna experience things that are not ideal, and sometimes it will go into that positive stress even, and then sometimes they'll dip into the other categories. That supportive relationship is so key to help offer that. to make us a bit more resilient towards that. Mm-hmm.
And validating the experience too, validating the feelings can go a long way towards feeling understood and supported through that.
Yeah.
Thank you, all of you. What would you suggest for parents who are arguing more during the pandemic and this is happening in front of their child?
I want to say that's common, I think, first of all. I think we hear that a lot. So that is a reality right now, because of just all the additional stressors that parents are dealing with. So it's a common problem or concern right now. Doesn't make it any easier. Heather, you look like you're thinking.
Well, I'm thinking that kids learn how to deal with conflict often from their families. And so arguing in front of your kids isn't really a problem. It depends on how you do it. And so I think it's an opportunity to really show your kids how to do conflict well when you can. And when you can't, also showing your kids how to repair. And we talked a little bit about that in our last presentation. So recognizing that all relationships go through these periods of, they're going along fine and we're attuned, we're together. Then we kind of have a problem and we're not so together. And then we come back and repair. And I think it's really important that all of our kids see all three of those steps happen, that they're not just seeing the argument and that they don't see the repair or that type of thing. So I think it depends on what that looks like. But I think really going back to what Marei is saying and recognizing that these are really stressful times and we want to show our kids how to work through these things. And conflict is part of life. And it's also an opportunity to come closer together if we can work through it together, and we can show our kids that too.
Thank you. I think so far that's all we have for questions. We have a comment. One of our participants is excited to discuss the role of parents in play in the next workshop. So registered yet, please do. That'll be in 2 weeks. And if there aren't any more questions coming through, we can wrap it up. And this recording will be made available on our website and YouTube page for Saanich Neighbourhood Place.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Nice to be with you. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you. Oh, thank you, everybody. Great. I will